She had been standing at the ropes for 2 hours. 2 hours in the Georgia heat, the kind that settles into your shoulders and presses down flat against your chest, the kind that makes the air feel close and dense like breathing through something slightly too warm. The tarmac at Fort Benning Airfield shimmered in the distance, long and gray and still, and Denise Lorraine Osei could see it from where she stood the whole stretch of it, the row of blue and white bunting strung along the fence line, the 2 military transport vehicles parked at a careful angle near the terminal building, the orange cones marking the edges of the access road. She could see all of it. She had made sure she could see all of it. She had arrived 2 hours early for exactly that reason. In her left hand she held a sign, white cardstock the size of a large cutting board. Its edges were slightly softened from where she had handled it in the parking lot during the 45 minutes she waited for the family waiting area to open. She had kept adjusting her grip, shifting it from hand to hand, reading the words on it as if checking that they were still there. She had made it the night before at her kitchen table in Macon. Blue marker, the kind she dug out of the junk drawer in her kitchen, the drawer where pens and rubber bands and old batteries and takeout menus all lived together in a democracy of usefulness. The marker bled a little at the edges if you pressed too hard. She had pressed just hard enough. She had been careful. The letters were clean. Andre's deployment number was at the top in characters she had looked up 3 times on the Family Readiness Group letter to make sure she had it exactly right. She was not the kind of person who got numbers wrong. But she checked anyway because this was not the moment for an error. Below, the deployment number in letters slightly larger. 3 words. Welcome home, son. She had thought about punctuation. She had actually sat at the table for a moment with the marker uncapped and thought, does this need a period? She decided against it. A period felt like a stopping point, like something arriving at a terminus. This was not a terminus. This was a beginning. This was the thing that 14 months of absence had been pointing toward, and you do not put a period at the beginning of something. She had driven 4.5 hours that morning. She had left Macon at 4:30 in the morning while the neighborhood was still dark, the street lights still on, the Hendersons' porch light on next door, the way it was always on the dog down the block, making its intermittent noise into the pre-dawn quiet. Her car was packed with nothing except her purse, a bottle of water that she finished somewhere on I-85, and a small cooler with a turkey sandwich she had made before she left, which she had not eaten because she was not hungry because her stomach was doing a thing. It did sometimes when something important was about to happen. A tight-coiled thing that left no room for food. She had driven 4.5 hours with both hands on the wheel and the radio tuned to a gospel station out of Columbus that came in clean through most of Georgia and then drifted into static somewhere around Phoenix City and then came back. She had sung along for a while. Then she had stopped singing and just driven because the words of the song stopped mattering and what was left was just the road and the dark and the slow lightening of the sky and the knowledge of where she was going and why. Denise was 51 years old. She had been a high school guidance counselor for 19 years at Westview High School in Macon, which meant she had spent 19 years learning how to stay calm when young people were falling apart in her office, how to hold her voice level when a teenager sat across from her and told her something that broke her open inside while she kept her face still and her body steady. She had learned that there are moments when stillness is the most powerful thing a person can offer, when being the calm thing in the room gives the person across from you permission to feel what they need to feel without being afraid that they will break you. She had spent 19 years practicing that stillness, and it lived in her now not as an effort, but as something closer to muscle memory. She was using it now at the rope line in the Georgia heat, holding her sign, watching the tarmac. 612 families were in the waiting area. She did not know the number yet. She would learn it from the base newsletter weeks later. What she knew in the moment was the texture of it, the press of bodies along the ropes, children running in small, tight circles, the way children do when they have been patient for too long. Parents shifting their weight from foot to foot. Grandparents who had the wisdom to bring folding chairs. spouses with infants strapped in carriers pressed against their chests, the infants looking out at the assembled world with the serious expressions of people encountering a new experience and taking notes. There were flags, small hand flags, the kind you get at gift shops, and larger ones on poles. There were balloons in red and white and blue, tied to stroller handles and belt loops and whatever else was available. There were signs, some printed professionally on foam board with photographs attached, some handwritten, some with glitter and streamers and hers, the plain white cardstock with the blue marker without glitter, without a period. The noise of 612 families together was a particular kind of sound. It was not quite crowd noise and not quite individual conversation. It was layered and dense, a living thing, and underneath it was a vibration that she could feel in her chest, even when she could not isolate it from the rest of the sound. It was anticipation. 612 families waiting for the same thing, which is someone they had been waiting for, someone coming home from somewhere far away. That vibration, the anticipation of it, pressed against everything. She thought about Andre. She thought about the phone call 11 days ago. The brief call, the connection choppy and delayed, the way international calls from deployment zones often are, the slight echo on the line, the half-second gap between what she said and when he heard it, and what he said and when she heard it. She thought about his voice on the call. He sounded tired, and she could hear the tiredness. But underneath the tiredness, something else. Something alert and forward-facing. Something that was already pointed toward home. He had said, "Mama, I am coming home." 5 words, and the connection had dropped immediately after, which was fine because 5 words was enough. 5 words was everything she needed. 5 words could carry 4.5 hours of driving before dawn, and 2 hours at a rope line in the Georgia heat. She had repeated those 5 words to herself in the car that morning. "Mama, I am coming home." She had said them quietly to herself somewhere in the dark on I-85, and they had been enough to fill the car. She thought about the night before. Kitchen table past 11 o'clock. The television was off. Outside the window, the neighborhood was doing its nighttime things, the Hendersons' porch light sending its square of yellow across the side yard, the dog down the block making its periodic announcement to the dark, the occasional car going past on the street. Inside the kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. The overhead light had that slight yellow quality that kitchen lights get at night when everything else is dark. That quality that makes the room feel both smaller and warmer than it is in daylight. She had spread the cardstock flat on the table. She had found the blue marker in the junk drawer, tested it on a scrap of paper, seen that it wrote clean. She had sat for a moment with the marker uncapped and the blank cardstock in front of her, and she had thought about what she wanted to say. She had considered more words. She had thought about writing something about 19 years, or something about Eastern Europe, or something about how many nights she had said his name out loud to the dark just to hear it and know it was real. She considered all of that, and she decided against all of it. 3 words was what the sign needed. 3 words and the deployment number. Everything else she would say with her presence, with the 4.5 hours of driving before dawn, with standing at the front of the rope line for 2 hours in the heat with holding the sign up, where he could see it from the tarmac. "Welcome home, son." She had pressed the marker to the cardstock, and she had written, going slowly, making each letter with care. She was making a signal. She was making a landmark. She was making a thing that said, "I am here. I have not moved. I have been here the whole time. Start walking toward me." When she finished, she had held the sign up in the kitchen light and looked at it and thought, "That is right. That is exactly right." The Georgia sun was warm on the back of her neck now. She shifted her weight to her left foot. She lifted the sign slightly, angling it to catch the light, practicing the angle she would use when the plane landed. She was at the front of the family waiting area, right at the rope, which was why she had come early. which was the whole point of 4:30 in the morning and I-85 in the dark. This was the spot. This was where she intended to remain. She did not see him coming until he was about 10 feet away. He was a large man, and he walked with a pace that was neither hurried nor casual, a deliberate pace that communicated awareness of itself, a pace that knew it was being watched and had decided what it wanted to communicate in being watched. He wore a gray security uniform with an embroidered badge patch on the left chest and a lanyard with a laminated ID card that swung against his sternum as he moved. He had a radio on his hip clipped to his belt and a pair of sunglasses pushed up on his forehead. His name was Paul Gentry. He was 39 years old. He was a contracted security officer employed not by the United States Army, but by a private security company that held a service contract with the base for parking and family waiting area management. He was not military. He was not base personnel. He held a contract. He walked like someone who had decided that the contract and the uniform were the same thing. And Denise Lorraine Osei would spend the next 35 minutes discovering exactly what that decision looked like when someone decided to enforce it. She watched him come toward her and thought, he is looking at me. She was right. He was. He stopped approximately 4 feet from where she was standing. Not outside her personal space, not at a conversational distance, 4 feet, which is close enough to make itself felt close enough to put a particular kind of pressure on the air between two people. He looked at her. He looked at the sign. He looked back at her face. His expression was professionally neutral, the kind of neutral that is itself a communication that says, I have decided what this situation is, and I have decided how I feel about it, and I have arranged my face to give away as little as possible. He said, ma'am, I need to see your family access credential. She had it. She had been holding it in her right hand since she walked from the parking lot. The family readiness group had mailed it to her 12 days ago, tucked into a folded letter that explained the homecoming ceremony procedures, the layout of the family waiting area, the parking instructions, and the credential system. She had read the letter 4 times. She had verified the QR code by testing it with her phone's camera the day it arrived. She had placed the card in a small zippered pouch in her purse, and then on the morning of the ceremony moved it to her right hand so she would not have to dig for it. The card was a laminated rectangle the size of a credit card. It had a printed QR code, a unique identifier number, her name in block letters, and the date of the ceremony. It was issued by the Fort Benning Family Readiness Group. It was the credential. It was the only credential. It was exactly what she was supposed to have. She held it out to him. He took it. He looked at it. She watched him look at it. She watched his eyes track across the surface of the card, the QR code, the identifier number, her name. He held it for a moment. And then something happened that she would think about later when she was trying to describe the encounter. A specific moment that she would struggle to name precisely. There was a pause. A held beat. A moment in which the obvious and correct thing, nodding, handing it back, walking away, seemed like it might happen. His expression shifted fractionally. He seemed for one suspended second on the verge of accepting it. Then he said, "This is the old format." She heard the words. She processed them. She turned them over the way you turn over something strange, something that does not fit the shape of what you know to be true, and she thought, what does that mean? What does old format mean? I received this card from the Family Readiness Group 12 days ago. There is no old format. There is the format that exists, which is this card which I am holding, which I received from the organization that sent it. She said, "I beg your pardon." Her voice was level. 19 years? The woman 2 spots to her left glanced at her a quick sideways look, the kind of look people exchange when something has happened that they want to confirm they both heard correctly. Denise did not look back. She kept her eyes on Gentry. He said, "The QR code cards, these are the old format. The Family Readiness Group updated the credential system. The current format is the green card. It has a green border and updated code sequence. Did you receive the updated green card from the readiness group? She was aware of several things at once. She was aware that the card he was describing did not exist. There had been no communication from the FRG about an updated format. No second mailing, no notification of any kind. And she had read every piece of correspondence they sent her because this was Andre's homecoming. And she was not the kind of person who missed correspondence about her son's homecoming. She was aware that the families immediately around her had gone quiet, the conversations pausing the way conversations pause when the air in a shared space changes. She was aware of the heat on the back of her neck. She was aware of the sign in her left hand. She had not put it down. She said, "I received this card from the family readiness group. It arrived in a letter with the ceremony instructions. I verified the code myself before I came. My son is on that plane." He said, "I understand, ma'am. But the green card is the current valid format. And if you did not receive the green card, that is something you would need to address with the readiness group office. For the purpose of the family waiting area, I need to see the current credential." He still had her card. He was holding it between his thumb and index finger, not returning it, and she was aware of that. Aware of the fact that the credential she had brought to this ceremony, the credential that bore her name and her son's deployment information, was currently in the hand of a man who was telling her it was insufficient, and he had not given it back. She thought, "He has my card. He is holding my card and telling me it is wrong, and he is not giving it back. I am standing at a rope line waiting for my son who is on a plane that is going to land on that tarmac, and a security guard is holding my card and telling me that a credential format exists that I was never told about and that I therefore do not have." She thought, "I know what I know what I received, I know what I verified, I know what this card is." She said, "That card is what the family readiness group sent me. If there is an updated format, I was not notified of one. This is my credential and my son's homecoming ceremony, and I am in the correct area." He said, "Ma'am, every family here went through the same credential process." He said it without raising his voice. He said it in the tone of someone offering a reasonable clarification, someone simply noting a fact about a process that exists and that everyone was informed about, and that therefore falls on each individual to have completed correctly. The implication was constructed and clean. 611 families had obtained the right credential. One had not. The process was the same for everyone. Therefore, the failure was the individual's. She heard the sentence and she understood its shape. She had been a guidance counselor for 19 years, and she had heard many versions of that sentence, the one that describes a process as universal while applying it unevenly. The one that says every student had access to the same resources while certain students sat in classrooms with broken textbooks. She had heard that sentence, and she had learned to name it, and she named it now quietly to herself. A woman. Two families to Denise's left said something to the person beside her, too low to make out the words. But the tone was clear, and the person next to her said something back in the same tone, and neither of them was agreeing with the man in the gray uniform. A man directly behind Denise said nothing. He simply stepped forward one step so that his presence was closer to the front of the rope so that there was less space between him and where Denise stood. Gentry had moved. She had not consciously tracked it, but now she noticed it. He had shifted his body slightly, left angling himself, which meant he was now standing directly in front of her, which meant his body was between her and the tarmac. The shimmering gray strip of landing surface, the bunting, the parked vehicles, all of it was behind him, now blocked by the width of a gray security uniform. She could not see the tarmac. She could not see where the plane would come from. Whether he had done this with deliberate intention, she could not say, and did not try to determine. Intent is a complicated thing to establish, and she had learned that the distinction between deliberate and careless cruelty is often less important than people think, because the result is the same either way. She said, "I would like my card back." He said, "I'm going to need you to step back to the general observer area while we get this sorted. The general observer area is behind the family section, It's past the blue barriers over on the right side. You'll still be able to watch the ceremony from there." The woman with the toddler on her hip, 2 spots to Denise's left, turned her head slightly toward the man beside her. She did not say anything aloud. She did not have to. Several people in the nearest cluster had oriented toward this exchange now, and the quality of their attention was not neutral. It was the attention of people who are listening because something is happening that they have decided to witness. She looked at him. She did not move. The general observer area was behind the family section. It did not have a direct view of the tarmac. It was where people went who were not in the family waiting area, who did not have verified credentials, who were watching from a distance. It was not where she was. It was not where she belonged. She thought about that phrase, general observer. She thought about what it means to be reclassified, to be moved from one category to another, from family to observer, from the front rope to the back, from the place where a mother stands to receive her son, to the place where strangers stand to watch someone else's son come home. She thought about the specific cruelty of that particular reclassification, the way it undid not just the credential but the relationship, the way it said you are not who you say you are. Here you are something lesser, you are general. She thought about the sign in her left hand. She had not put it down. She was not going to put it down. She said, "I am not moving. I am a verified family member. My name is Denise Lorraine Osei. My son is Specialist First Class Andre Osei, and he is on that plane, and I have the correct credential, and I am not moving." He said, "Ma'am." Just ma'am, the word alone with a quality to the pause after it. She knew that pause. She had known it for a long time. The pause that follows a word and does a particular kind of work. The work of suggesting that the person being addressed is being unreasonable, is making a situation more difficult than it needs to be. That if she would simply comply, if she would simply go to the general observer area, everything could be resolved with minimal fuss, and she could watch the ceremony from there, from behind the barriers, from the smaller and less visible place. The pause that says this is easier if you cooperate. The pause that says, why are you making this harder than it is? The pause that says nothing explicitly and says everything implicitly. She kept her feet where they were. She kept the sign in her left hand. She had not put it down. She thought about the children who came to her office, the ones who were told they tested into the wrong level, the ones who were told the opportunity had been available to everyone, the ones who sat in her office with their hands on their knees and that particular look on their face that meant they were trying to decide whether to believe the institution or believe themselves. She had spent 19 years sitting across from those children and telling them what you know is real. You know what you know. Do not let someone make you doubt what you have verified with your own eyes and your own effort. She was going to take her own advice. Gentry reached for his radio. He unclipped it from his hip and pressed the transmit button and said, "This is Gentry. I have a credential compliance issue in the family waiting area section, 4 front rope. Requesting confirmation on updated format protocol. Stand by." She heard those words, credential compliance issue, and she felt something harden quietly inside her. Not anger, not exactly. Something cleaner and colder than anger. A credential compliance issue. That is what she was now, standing at this rope with her handmade sign after 4.5 hours of driving before dawn, after 12 days of holding this card carefully in the zippered pouch of her purse, after 4 readings of the FRG letter, after checking and rechecking the QR code on her own phone. A credential compliance issue in Section 4. She thought, I have been a guidance counselor for 19 years. I have sat with hundreds of children who were told that their paperwork was wrong, that their test scores were insufficient, that the program they qualified for had somehow been filled, that the process that was supposed to be the same for everyone had produced for them a different result. I have listened to every version of that story, and I have helped those children find their way through it, and I know exactly what that process looks like from the inside. I am standing inside it right now. I am in Section 4, and I am a credential compliance issue, and my son is on that plane, and I have not moved, and I am not going to move." The radio crackled. A voice came back that she could not fully make out. He responded, "Copy." He reclipped the radio. He looked at her. He said, "While we get this clarified, ma'am, I need you to step back from the rope." And he placed his hand on her shoulder. It was not a violent gesture. It was the gesture of someone who has decided that a person's body is an object that can be redirected, that the appropriate response to non-compliance is to physically indicate the direction of compliance. The hand was firm and the pressure was deliberate, and it pointed her body away from the rope, away from the tarmac, toward the general observer area. She felt the weight of his hand, and something in her went very still. She took one step back. Not toward the general area, just back enough to break the contact. His hand fell away. She said, "Do not touch me." Her voice was completely level. There was no shake in it. There was no rise in pitch, no crack. Nothing that would give anyone observing any indication that she was anything other than completely composed. 19 years of practice. She had said harder things than this in a level voice. She had sat with kids who were in crisis. Real crisis. The kind where someone did not know if they wanted to still be alive. And she had kept her voice level through that. And she was going to keep her voice level through this. The man with the Fort Campbell flag directly behind and slightly to her right had gone very still. He was watching. His arms were down at his sides, not crossed, not reaching out, just present, just available, just there. Gentry took a small step back. He held up one hand, palm out, the universal gesture of, "I am not the problem here." He said, "Ma'am, I'm not trying to make this a difficult situation." She said, "Then give me my card and step back from the rope." He said, "I understand your frustration. I'm trying to resolve this correctly." She said, "The card is correct. Give it back." He did not give it back. He held it and he said, "I want to make sure we get this resolved before the aircraft arrives. If you'll just..." A voice from her right, from approximately 20 feet along the rope line, said, "Officer." One word. But the quality of it, the weight and direction of it, was such that the conversation stopped completely, and both Gentry and Denise and the families immediately around them all turned toward the sound. She was 58 years old, and she walked like someone who had made a decision before she started walking and saw no reason to revisit it. She wore a Fort Benning Family Readiness Group Coordinator lanyard, the official one with the base insignia printed in navy and gold, the kind that is issued to staff, not volunteers. She was carrying a document folder with a zipper closure navy blue with the FRG insignia in the lower right corner. She had already unzipped the folder. She had already found the document she needed. She had heard the exchange from 20 feet away. 20 feet is not far, not in an outdoor crowd that had gone quiet in a particular direction, and she had been moving while Gentry was still talking, methodical and unhurried, and she arrived now at Gentry's side, not behind him, at his side. The distinction was visible and intentional. It communicated without words that she was not a bystander who had wandered over to ask a clarifying question. She was a coordinator. She was a former sergeant major. She was someone whose lanyard and bearing and measured pace all said the same thing. This is a professional arrival, and I have arrived at the side of the person who has been wronged, not behind the person who did the wronging. Denise looked at her. She felt something shift, not relief. Not yet, but the specific sensation of no longer being alone in a situation of someone with standing and knowledge and a document folder appearing at your side and choosing to be there. It was a small shift, and it was an enormous one simultaneously. Her name was Claudia Barnes. She held the rank of Sergeant Major, retired after 26 years of service. She had been an FRG coordinator for 4 years since her retirement. She had been at 51 homecoming ceremonies in that capacity, which meant she had some experience with what a homecoming ceremony looked like when it was going correctly and what it looked like when it was not. She said, "I need you to show me the credential." Gentry looked at her lanyard. He said, "Ma'am, I am handling a credential compliance issue." She said, "I heard." Show me the credential." He held it out, not releasing it, just displaying it. Barnes looked at it without taking it. She reached into her open folder and produced a document. The document had a laminated cover, blue header, the official Fort Benning insignia at the top center, and below that, in clean block type, Family Access Credential Verification Guide. Below that, in smaller type, Current Edition. Below that, in the lower right corner of the cover, an edition date that was current, not a year old, not 2 years old, current. The edition in use for this cycle of ceremonies. She opened it. She turned to a page near the middle, a page she had turned to before a page she knew. She held it out toward Gentry, and she pointed to a section with her index finger. She said, "This is the current credential format guide for Fort Benning Family Access. There are 2 formats listed in this document. The digital app credential accessible through the FRG mobile application, and the QR code card credential, which is the format that was mailed to verified family members for this ceremony. Those are the 2 formats. There is no green card format. There is no updated green border format. There is no updated code sequence. The QR code card is the current format. That is what this document says." She let Gentry look at the page. He looked at it. She said, "If the green card format you have been referencing exists in any official document, I would like you to show me the page where it is described." Gentry took the guide from her because she offered it, and he turned pages. He started at the front. He went through the document section by section. He turned to the back. He went back to a middle section. He was methodical about it. She would give him that. He was not rushing. He was actually looking, which made it more painful to watch, not less, because everyone watching him understood that he was looking for something that was not there, and that he was the only one who did not yet fully understand the implications of that. He turned back to the front. He went to a different middle section. He found the credential formats page, and he looked at it, and he looked at the text, and he looked at the 2 formats listed, and he looked for a 3rd format and found no 3rd format. Barnes said nothing. She did not fill the silence with clarification or commentary. She did not help him look. She stood at Denise's side, the 2 of them at the rope, and she let him search the document for the thing that was not in it. The families around them watched. The Georgia heat was present. Somewhere at the distant end of the airfield, a vehicle moved across the edge of the tarmac, a small motion that was not yet the arrival of the plane. Denise held her sign. She had not put it down. She had not put it down when he said the credential was wrong. She had not put it down when he told her to go to the general observer area. She had not put it down when his hand was on her shoulder. She held it now, and she thought about the night before the kitchen table, the junk drawer marker, the letters she had made slowly and carefully, the signals she had built in advance for her son to find. She thought, "I made this for him to see. I am going to make sure he can see it. I have not put it down, and I am not going to put it down." Gentry turned back to the front of the guide. He stopped at the credential formats page again. He looked at it for a longer moment. Barnes said, "Officer, can you identify the page where the green card format is listed?" He looked up. He did not answer immediately. His expression had changed. The professional neutral had developed something underneath it, a texture that had not been there before. She said, "The page number, if you can find it. I would like to know where in this document the green card format is described." He said, "I need to verify this with the base liaison." Barnes had her own radio. It was already in her hand. She pressed transmit, and she said clearly and without hurry, "Fort Benning Family Readiness to Base Liaison. This is Sergeant Major Barnes, FRG Coordinator. I am requesting confirmation on family access credential status for Denise Lorraine Osei, family member of record for Specialist First Class Andre Osei. Can you confirm?" The radio crackled. Then the voice of Lieutenant Colonel Denise Park came through the base liaison officer, and her voice was clear and immediate. Not the voice of someone who had to look something up. The voice of someone who knew the answer. "Sergeant Major Barnes, Denise Lorraine Osei is a verified family member on the current roster. Her credential is the QR code card current format issued by the Fort Benning FRG. She is confirmed and cleared for the family waiting area. Is there an issue? Barnes said, "We are resolving it now. Thank you, ma'am." The radio had not been quiet. The radio voice had carried. The families within 10 feet had heard it, and the families within 15 feet had heard enough to understand, and the information moved outward from there. The way information moves through a crowd which is quickly and in multiple directions at once. Several people exhaled. Not dramatically, the sound was quiet. Distributed the sound of breath releasing from the place where people hold breath when they are watching something they are worried about, and then the worry resolves. A man 2 rows back said something to his wife, and she squeezed his arm. The woman with the toddler murmured something to the toddler, low and soothing. Though the toddler had not been distressed, she was speaking to herself as much as to the child. The air around the rope line shifted. Not a dramatic shift, not a theatrical one, but a real one. The kind of shift that happens in a crowd when the balance of a situation changes, and the people in the crowd feel it before they can articulate it. Barnes looked at Gentry. He was still holding the credential guide. He was not looking at it anymore. She said, "Do you have any additional questions about this credential?" He said nothing. She said, "Give the lady her card." He held the card out toward Denise. She took it. She put it in her right hand, and then she shifted the sign back to her left hand, and she straightened up, and she stood at the rope line with her card in her right hand and her sign in her left hand, and she thought, "I have been in the right place. I was in the right place the whole time. I did not move, and I was right not to move." Not. Barnes closed the credential guide. She looked at Gentry for a moment. Then she said, "She is in the right place. She has been in the right place." That was all she said about it. She did not elaborate. She did not deliver an extended commentary. She said what was true clearly, and then she turned to face the tarmac. She did not leave. She did not walk back to the spot she had come from 20 feet along the rope. She stood beside Denise Lorraine Osei at the front of the family waiting area at the rope where she would remain for the duration of the ceremony. The Fort Benning FRG coordinator was at the front rope, which meant that the front rope was exactly where the correct people stood, and every family within visual range understood this without requiring any further elaboration. The families near Denise had not moved during the encounter. She had not fully tracked this while it was happening, but she was aware of it now, the cluster of families immediately around her. 3 or 4 family groups on either side had not stepped back. They had not created room. They had not made the kind of space that sometimes opens around a confrontation to give the parties involved room to resolve it without witnesses. They had stayed where they were. The woman with the toddler on her hip to Denise's left had kept her hand on the rope and had not let go of the rope. A man with a Fort Campbell flag, he might have been there for the wrong ceremony, or he might not have been, had moved slightly forward when Gentry's hand had been on Denise's shoulder. Not dramatically, not in a way that constituted a confrontation, just forward, just present, just a body choosing not to step away from what was happening. Gentry stood for a moment. He looked at the closed credential guide in his hand. He looked at Barnes. He looked at Denise. Then he looked at the ground briefly, and then he looked away. And then he walked away, back through the center of the family waiting area, away from the rope moving between families who stepped back from him with a specific kind of unhurry that is its own communication. Denise watched him go. She noticed that her breathing had slowed, not in the moment of him walking away, but sometime earlier, sometime in the middle of it. She had regulated herself back to a steady breath, and she had not noticed it happening because it had not been a decision. It had been the thing her body knew how to do after 19 years. She was breathing steadily. Her feet were where they had been for 2 hours. The sign was in her left hand. None of those things had changed. Barnes said nothing more. She stood beside Denise, and she faced the tarmac, and she was simply present the way a person with authority is present when they have decided something is settled, and there is nothing left to do but stand in the settled thing and wait for what was coming. The FRG coordinator lanyard was visible. Everyone near the rope could see it. No further words were necessary. Denise turned back to the tarmac. It was still there. The shimmering gray strip, the bunting, the parked vehicles, all of it exactly where it had been when she arrived 2 hours ago before any of this had happened. The tarmac had not moved. The landing zone had not moved. And she had not moved. She was at the front of the rope, at the best position in the family waiting area with her sign in her hand, and Sergeant Major Barnes standing at her shoulder, and the Georgia sun warm on the back of her neck, and 612 families around her, and her son's plane in the sky somewhere approaching. She thought about the night before again. The kitchen light, the blank cardstock. The moment before she started writing, when she just sat and thought about what she was doing. She had been making a way for him to find her. She had been making herself into a landmark. She had been saying with the sign what she had always been saying. The whole time he was deployed, the whole 14 months, I am here. I have not moved. I am waiting for you. Start walking toward me. I will be in the right place. The sound of the plane came before she could see it clearly. It came as a thickening in the air, a low vibration that you feel in the chest before you locate it as sound, and then it separated from the background noise of the crowd and became distinct and directional, coming from the far end of the airfield. Someone to her left said there. She looked. The aircraft was visible at the far end of the runway, enormous and gray and moving with the careful controlled speed of something large, learning to be still. It came down the length of the strip, and the sound of it expanded to fill the entire airfield, and the family waiting area noise changed completely, went from the layered hum of anticipation to something else, something that is not easily named, a collective sound made of relief and recognition, and the particular kind of joy that exists on the other side of a long wait. She felt it in her chest. She felt it in the backs of her knees. She felt it in the place behind her sternum where the tight, difficult feeling from the encounter with Gentry had lived, and that feeling was now gone, replaced by something with no edge to it, something that did not have an underside. The aircraft taxied to a stop near the terminal building. A long moment passed, the kind of moment that stretches because everyone on both sides of the barrier is waiting for the same thing. Then the door opened, the stairs descended, and the first soldiers appeared at the top of the stairs. The sound from the family waiting area reached a register she could feel as much as hear. She lifted her sign, both hands straight up the white cardstock angled to catch the afternoon light. The blue marker letters, the deployment number, the 3 words. She held it as high as she could. She was at the front of the rope, and she was holding the sign she had made the night before in her kitchen with the junk drawer marker, and she thought, he will see it. I made it so he could see it. He is going to see it. She scanned the top of the stairs. Soldiers were coming down 1, then 2, then a stream of them. And she was looking for the particular set of shoulders, the particular height, the way he held his body, all the things that are unmistakable once you know them. She was looking for her son in the stream of other people's sons and daughters. And the crowd around her was doing the same thing. 612 families, all doing the same thing simultaneously, scanning, searching, trying to find the specific person they had been waiting for across the general arrival of everyone. He appeared at the top of the stairs. He appeared, and he stood there for one moment at the top, and he looked out across the waiting area. He was scanning. She could see him scanning even at the distance, the slight movement of his head, the searching quality of it, the same thing she was doing from her side, the two of them looking for each other across the distance. She watched him scan. She held the sign higher. He found the sign before he found her face. She saw the moment it happened, his scan stopped. His eyes fixed on a point, and his arm came up, his index finger extended, pointing the unmistakable gesture of finding the thing you have been looking for. Pointing at it so that it knows you found it, so that the distance between you and the thing collapses into a single line. He was pointing at the sign. At Welcome Home, son in blue marker on white cardstock, made at a kitchen table past 11 at night with the junk drawer marker, and pressed with just the right amount of pressure so the letters came out clean. And then he was moving. He came down the stairs with the urgency of someone for whom the stairs are simply an obstacle between himself and where he is going. Careful at the top where they were crowded, running at the bottom. A full run, the kind of running that is not about efficiency, but about closing distance, defeating distance, making the space between two people into nothing as fast as possible. He ran across the tarmac. He came through the access gate and the rope line, the crowd making room for him without being asked, because the crowd had been watching, because the crowd understood, because 612 families all knew exactly what was happening. He came through the crowd. She had already opened her arms. The sign went somewhere. She must have lowered it, or let it drop, or someone caught it. She genuinely could not say. Later, she had no clear memory of the moment the sign left her hands, because what filled that moment was Andre. 24 years old, solid and real and present, his arms around her, her arms around him. 14 months of absence collapsed into a single point. She could feel the reality of him, the weight of him, the warmth, the sound of him breathing next to her ear. He was real. He was home. She was in the right place. She thought, I have been in the right place the whole time. I have not moved. I was right here. The family waiting area applauded. Not the polite scattered applause of an audience at a formal event, not a ceremony applause. The full-throated, uninhibited whole-body sound of 600 families who had been waiting and who had watched what happened at the rope line and who were now releasing 2 hours and 14 months of held breath simultaneously. The sound filled the airfield. It rose into the Georgia afternoon and expanded outward. Sergeant Major Barnes stood 2 feet away. She did not applaud. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her and her face holding the expression of someone who has been present at many important moments, and who knows how to be present at one without making it about themselves. The base public affairs officer, positioned in the press area to the right of the family section, had been photographing with a long lens from the moment the plane door opened. He had tracked Andre at the top of the stairs. He had caught the moment of the pointing Andre at the bottom of the staircase, arm, extended index finger, out the sign, visible in the upper portion of the frame above the heads of the crowd, the blue letters readable even at distance. He had the run. He had the moment of the embrace. When he went through the frames later that evening, he would identify the pointing image as the one that showed the sign, showed the momentum of a person running toward someone they love, showed the whole story in a single frame. That photograph was published in the base newsletter the following month. It was accompanied by a brief account of the homecoming ceremony. The image showed the sign, showed Andre's whole body turned toward it. In motion, showed the space of the airfield behind him and the crowd in front. The newsletter was shared. The image traveled. People who had not been at Fort Benning Airfield on that afternoon saw Andre pointing at a sign that said, "Welcome home, son," and they understood what they were looking at. They understood because that image has a complete story inside it, a story that does not require explanation. A young soldier just arrived, not yet even off the tarmac, pointing at a piece of white cardstock in a crowd, the gesture as direct and unambiguous as any gesture a person can make. Someone made that sign. Someone held it up. Someone made sure it was legible from a distance. And the person it was made for found it immediately across 600 families and all that noise and all that distance and pointed at it and ran. The photograph holds all of that. It requires no caption. She looked at her son across the kitchen table and she thought, I am going to tell this story to my students. Not as an abstract lesson, not as a framework or a principle or a talking point. She was going to tell it as what it was, a specific afternoon, a specific rope line, a specific man in a gray uniform who stood between her and the tarmac and called her card wrong and told her to move. She was going to tell them about the 2 hours she stood there before any of that happened, and the sign she made the night before, and the decision she made at the kitchen table not to put a period at the end because this was not a terminus. This was a beginning. She was going to tell them about not putting down the sign. She was going to tell them the sign matters. What you make for someone matters. The act of making a signal so that someone can find you, that act is worth protecting. Do not put it down. In the weeks following the ceremony, several things were set in motion that Denise did not cause, but that happened in response to what had occurred at the rope line. Sergeant Major Claudia Barnes went home that evening and sat at her own table and wrote a formal account of the incident. She had written formal reports for 30 years, and she wrote this one with the same discipline. Timestamps, direct quotations, the exact text of the radio confirmation from Lieutenant Colonel Park, a description of the Credential Verification Guide and its contents, a description of the physical contact, a description of the radio call Gentry had made. She submitted the account to the base commander's office the following morning. It was a complete document. It was the kind of document that is hard to set aside. Lieutenant Colonel Park submitted her own account. She had confirmed Denise's credential by radio, and she had subsequently learned the full sequence of events that had preceded that radio call, and she documented what she knew in the language appropriate to her role. The base contracting oversight office made contact with several families who had been standing near the rope line during the incident. Those families gave their accounts. The accounts were consistent. The formal review of Gentry's contracting assignment opened a secondary process. The secondary process required someone to look at Gentry's file. In Gentry's file, there was a prior complaint filed 8 months earlier from a different homecoming ceremony. The prior complaint also involved a black family in a family waiting area. That complaint had been filed and reviewed and closed without findings set aside. The way some complaints are set aside, closed in that space between the filing and the conclusion where certain things disappear and other things do not. It did not disappear now. The prior complaint was reopened. At the end of the contract year, the private security company that employed Gentry submitted a renewal bid for the Fort Benning Parking and Family Waiting Area Service contract. The base contracting process evaluated the bid against documented criteria. The company was not selected for renewal. The contract went to a different vendor. Denise learned some of this from Barnes, who called her at home in Macon to tell her what had happened with the formal account. She learned some of it from the brief item in the base newsletter that ran alongside the homecoming photograph. She read the item once and set the newsletter on the kitchen table and sat for a moment looking at it. Then she picked it back up and read it again. She thought about what to do with the information. She thought about the children in her office, the ones who had been told the process was fair while it was applied to them differently. The ones who had sat with their hands on their knees and that expression that meant they were deciding whether to believe the institution or believe themselves. She thought about what she told them. She thought, you are right to believe yourself. You know what you know. Stay where you belong. She had told them that for 19 years. Andre was in the kitchen. He had come home with her to Macon after the ceremony, and he had been there for a week, sleeping until 10 in the morning, which he had not done since he was a teenager, and eating at irregular hours, and sitting on the back porch in the evenings, and being present in the way that people are present when they have been far away for a long time. And the being present is itself something they are still adjusting to. She was adjusting to it too. The presence of him in her house, the sound of him in another room, the light in his bedroom window that she could see from the kitchen when she came downstairs at night. She had found herself standing in the kitchen at odd hours just to see that light, just to confirm it was on, just to know he was there in the next room home real. He was in the kitchen now, eating the turkey sandwich from the cooler. She had finally unpacked it. It was several days old, and it had been in a cooler, and then out of the cooler, and it was at room temperature, and he was eating it with great enthusiasm and complete satisfaction, the way that someone eats something after a long time of not having had the things they are used to. He had said you made a whole sandwich. She had said, "I made it the morning I drove." He had said 4:30 in the morning. She had said 4:30 in the morning. He had looked at her for a moment and then taken another bite. Outside the kitchen window, the neighborhood was doing its evening things. The Hendersons' porch light was on. Somewhere down the block, the dog was doing what the dog does. Inside the kitchen had its yellow nighttime quality, warm and small and present. The sign was on the refrigerator. She had pressed it flat against the door when they got back to Macon and found the magnet she used for that, a magnet shaped like the state of Georgia picked up at a rest stop years ago. She had pressed the cardstock flat and put the magnet in the center. The blue letters. The deployment number. "Welcome home, son." It was on the refrigerator. Andre had looked at it when he first walked into the kitchen, and he had stood there for a moment, and he had said, "You really made that with the junk drawer marker." She had said it was the only marker I could find. He had said, "Mama." Just that, just her name in the way that he said it sometimes when he did not have the words for the thing he was feeling. She had said, "I know." And they had stood there in the kitchen for a moment with that between them, which was enough, which was more than enough. She looked at her son across the table, 24 years old, home from 14 months in Eastern Europe. Home in her kitchen, eating a late turkey sandwich, present, real found. She had made a sign. She had driven 4.5 hours before dawn. She had stood at a rope line for 2 hours in the Georgia heat. She had held her position when someone told her to move. She had kept the sign in her hand through all of it. She had not put it down. He had seen the sign first. He had pointed at it from the top of the stairs, and then he had run. She had been in the right place. She had always been in the right place. If you have ever made a sign for someone, if you have ever driven through the dark to be somewhere for someone, if you have ever stood your ground when someone told you that you were wrong to be where you were standing, and you knew you were right and you stayed, this story belongs to you. Leave a comment and tell us about a time you held your position. Tell us about the person you would have driven 4.5 hours for. Tell us about the sign you would have made with the junk drawer marker at 11 at night and the letters you would have pressed into the cardstock slowly and carefully because you wanted them to be readable from a distance, because you wanted the person you were waiting for to be able to find you. Subscribe our channel. We are here every week with stories about people who held their ground, people who stayed in the right place, people who did not put down their signs. Those stories matter. Those people deserve to be seen. Thank you for being with us today. We will see you in the next one.